Awesome. All right. Well, I know we have a lot of great information to cover today. Hi, Mr. Mike Lampa. We see you in the chat. Mike's getting us kicked off there. So without further ado, I would like to officially welcome everybody to our session today. We are here for 12 data visualization tips and tricks going deeper. And then maybe it was actually now 10. I can't, we think we just, yeah, we slimmed it down a little because
Yeah.
we're going deeper into this one. So I don't know how many of you were able to join us for our first session that we did. This was in March. And we had a great reception, great conversation, and people were asking about a second session. And so that puts us here today. A little bit of fun facts there. We had 99 people sign up for that first session. On today's call, 128. So Todd, Connor, you're doing great. Let's keep it rolling. Maybe we'll have to do a third session. Let's see how this shakes out. So officially, again, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Kelly Garrido. I head up marketing and events here at Great Data Minds, which is now a Hike 2 company. A little bit about GDM. We are a collective of passionate data activists, and we are on a mission to modernize the world of data. We do this in two different ways. The first is that we have our services arm. This is our strategic planning, education, and the deployment of critical data projects. This happens at hike2.com. You can find our data and analytics page there. And then when it comes to the data and analytics community, content, and conversation, this is where you can find us at greatdataminds.com. We host events just like these. We run our videos, our podcasts, and we try to feature transformational thought leaders and innovative technologies, just like what we're going to do for you today. So, a little bit of housekeeping. This is, of course, a webinar, so your cameras and microphones are off. But as Mike Lampa has already modeling, we welcome questions throughout the session, conversation. You can use the chat. You can also use the Q&A. And we've got a little bit of time reserved for more formal Q&A at the end if you prefer to wait for that. Yes, we will be recording today's session, so we will share that back out with everyone via our YouTube channel. I will be happy to put a link into the chat for how you can find us there. So, we are very excited to host the next episode in our series today, and allow me to do some introductions for my esteemed guests. The first is that we have special guest Todd McGuire. Todd is a technology executive with 25 years of experience leading product and technology teams in industries including e-com, healthcare, professional services, manufacturing, and hospitality. Todd has a proven track record of architecting and implementing tech roadmaps to successfully launch and deliver software as a service products from concept to full market rollout. He's got extensive data analytics expertise designing and building actionable dashboards for managing sales ops and health research data. And that's what we're here to do today, is to start talking about some of these dashboards and visualizations and the different ways that we can do this. My counterpart on the other line here is Connor Dunning. He is one of our Hike 2 employees. He's a driven solution architect who excels at helping clients transform complex data landscapes into actionable insights. And he plays at the forefront of analytics enablement, connecting companies with their own specific data. So Connor and Todd, thank you both so much for joining me today. And Connor, I'll pass the microphone to you.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you, Kelly, and welcome everyone. Super excited for today's session. As Kelly was mentioning, a kind of a real popular session back in March where we kind of walk through, at a high level, we walk through requirement gathering for business intelligence, right? Uncovering the pain points of your stakeholders, persona mapping, assessing the skill level of your users. We walk through different dashboard types, such as dashboards built specifically for reporting, dashboards built around discovery and understanding the business a little bit further, and then we actually walk through some examples around some storytelling dashboards which are kind of more conclusive in the insights they provide. And then at the end of that session we did get a chance to walk through some tips and tricks, walking through like the Z-score and some patterns there. And so today we really wanted to deep dive into those tips and tricks and spend some time with Todd, understanding what are some approaches he would deploy, with some very specific scenarios and some specific, we'll say design approaches within, a dashboarding tool. Before I hand it over to Todd and before we kick off, I'd love to get the group here on the line engaged. I would love to understand, everyone out there that's, either a business intelligence developer, maybe an end user, someone that's looking to get into the space. I'd love to know what tools you're using. Are you using Tableau? Are you using Power BI? Are you using ThoughtSpot, Sigma, Figma? Would love to know what you're using or what your tool preference is. Looker is another example. So if you could, please drop those answers in the chat. We'd love to take a look at that. As we go through this presentation, I would like to call out that I think some of Todd's visualizations here are built in, Tableau, for example's sake, but, a lot of these concepts can be applied across the board and are by no means specific to Tableau. So without further ado, Todd, I will pass it over to you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Connor, and thank you, Kalia, for that nice introduction. And good afternoon, everyone out on the East Coast. And if you're out west, I'm in Denver, Colorado. Good morning. So I'm going to share my screen. Can everyone see the slides now? Fantastic. And as I go through the talk today, if you have a question, feel free to throw it in the chat, and definitely love to see what triggers your imagination when you see some of these ideas. But what I'm going to do today is take us through a roadmap that is mostly digging into the trenches and showing some tactical, practical ideas of what you can do to try to elevate your data visualization. I sprinkle in a little bit of the theory, some of the things that I spent more time on in the first session. I'm going to bring up a couple of them that are relevant when we get into some of these specific examples of how it might apply into a dashboard. But I'm going to cover kind of a wide gamut of things that are very low level and tactical, and some of them are kind of higher level about how you can try to accelerate how you're building some of these visualizations. And then I'm going to wrap up, as I did the first time. I always try to see if I can show you in 90 seconds how to build one of these things. And so I've got a quick demo at the very end of actually putting one of these ideas into practice. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is just looking at data and thinking of all the ways you can visualize it. And so on this first slide, you're going to see a very simple data set, very basic. All 8 of these visualizations are looking at the exact same data set. And I think this is a good illustration of just the possibilities in any of these BI tools. They're going to let you visualize your data in a number of ways. Some of them are great right out of the box. Some of them I think are kind of confusing and distracting right out of the box, but they're sometimes dangerously easy to make. And so it's an interesting exercise I'll often do when working with a new data set is do an example like this just for myself, just to get started and try to understand a little bit about the shape of the data. And very quickly I could start to see, oh wow, this data is shaped in a manner that this type of visualization seems like this might be a great fit for how to use it. And you can go through and do versions of this that have the same data 12 ways or 20 different ways, depending on the tool you're using. But I think we've got a poll to kind of get some people's feedback before I go on to the next slide.
Yeah, here, everyone. So the kind of the concept here is everyone kind of, what would be your preference here? Looking at kind of, these 8 visualizations, what might be your go-to to kind of display a trend here?
Yep, we see the answers are starting to come in. So everybody go ahead and interact with this first poll. There's another poll coming up as well. So we're really interested to hear how this all stacks up for you, on which data set visualization you prefer. Okay, people are still answering. Yeah, good note in the chat. Depends on the story you are trying to tell.
Oh, there you go. Exactly.
Okay. All right, I'm going to cut it in just a few more seconds. We've had it up for about a minute. Really great engagement. 72% of you are participating. We appreciate that. Okay, I'm going to end the poll and I'll share it back. You can see how you stack up.
I think that's what we'd expect, right, Todd?
Yeah, yeah.
Those would
No, that's
probably be
good.
your 3 go-to.
Yeah, my guess was number 4, which is kind of a version of number 3. But exactly, this one jumped out if you were trying to convey the trend data and a little bit of the composition data without a lot of added views. I think you can get that done with both 3 and 4. So I think that's a good example of looking at the data, looking at different ways to slice it and dice it and get a sense of, hey, here's the right chart type to begin with. And that gets into just this broader concept of the data type and the chart type and trying to match those up. And this is one where you'll see this in every one of your visualizations. And this is one of the few pieces we're going to get into just kind of some of the higher level strategy again. But sometimes what you're asked for from your stakeholder is, I'm just trying to compare how this is performing versus something else. But sometimes it's different than that. It's more about the chronology of the data and its time series. And I'm trying to understand what that's doing over time, or how the results are distributed, which is different from how it's going to compare from one product category to another. It might be more, what's the shape of this across a certain demographic group. So thinking about kind of the question you're getting from the business user in the very beginning is key, I think, to picking which one of these chart types is going to fit the best for what you're trying to do. And so here are a couple of examples I've put in that are kind of going from the other end of the spectrum. We started with a bar chart, very simple, basic. It's what everyone uses. But maybe it's your data has a spatial element to it. Here's an example looking at sports statistics, and there's some things here that lend themselves to a bar chart right up at the top, and looking at different comparisons across different areas. But then down in the bottom, this is probably one of the most efficient ways to show some of this density-based data. And in the context of what we're doing here, it's a hockey shot. This could also be in the context of activity in a retail client that has people with foot traffic and purchase behavior on shelves. So, this is a different type of a chart type, but it can fit in, and it might be the most efficient way. If you tried to describe what's going on where McKinnon should be teeing off, it'd take a lot longer doing this with a classic chart.
Right, it should be posted up there in the top hash of the right circle.
Yeah. I mean, it's clear. Here's another example in kind of a different context. So this is a visualization I built looking at tornado data. We're kind of getting into tornado season, and trying to understand kind of the patterns and the density of tornado data. It's kind of tricky. So in the first example, I tried to go through and do it by a density of mapping each one of the tornado events, and that was overwhelming. Then went the other way and said, no, let me do it with a chloropleth map and show the states and the density of how many were there. But there's just too much data. Like when I zoom in on Florida, there's still 5,600 tornadoes of varying intensity in that area. So the data gets very crowded, very messy, and it's hard to convey what's happening. So it's either one extreme or the other with a traditional chart approach that I use on these first two. But on this next one, this is a totally different way, and this is using a concept called a hex bin. And so you can take that map data, and instead of showing all the counties and all the locations with their exact geographic size, which you can miss data or a big county can blow out the data, you normalize that and equalize it across your data set. And here you can see the same data, but very clearly I can get the shape of it. I can see the intensity that I was looking for. And it took kind of stepping out of the box of what the traditional off-the-shelf mapping visualization element from your BI tool might guide you toward. So it's another kind of a different example of understand the chart types, understand the data type, and think outside the box sometimes. And to help do that, there are some amazing tools out there. I've got the link in here to one that's a great collection of 100 different chart types of all different scenarios. And each one of these, if you are one of the Tableau users, you can go and download these from Tableau Public, so you can play with that structure. So this is often a good thing to use, right in the beginning as you're in that strategy mode of your project and trying to figure out, what's going to be the best way to align this.
So Todd, if I may real quick, we got a lot of Power BI users out there. Is that a plug for Tableau, or if I'm, maybe in some of these other is that out of the box Tableau functionality, some of those advanced features, or is that a plugin or a widget?
No, it's not. I'm going to talk in a few minutes about some extensions that are kind of plugins to a BI tool like Tableau. But some of the pieces in here that I've just shown are ones you need to build on your own. Like, so that hex bin, for instance, you can build that in Power BI just as you can build it in Tableau, and it's not an off-the-shelf component. They've got their basic bar, line, area, bubble plot, box plot, the classic chart components are in there. But some of these you'll need to, you can just, it's a matter of picking the right one, and others are a matter of, okay, I need to recreate that from the ground up the way I want.
Got it. No, thank you.
Yeah, and definitely, you'll see as Connor mentioned, Tableau is what I'm using for, I think, just about all the examples that are in this presentation today, just because that's the tool that I use the most. But just about everything I'm covering, it applies to any BI tool that you're using. So, and even, the one that I just showed you, that dashboard catalog of 100 dashboards that's on Tableau Public. Yes, those are Tableau dashboards, but I would recommend you're building in Power BI and you're just looking for kind of brainstorming innovation on how to build what you're building. Still use those as references. It's a great catalog. It's a great collection. Tableau tends to have a very enthusiastic user community, and so I tend to see a bit more examples like that there. So the next one I want to move on to is about Whitespace, and this is a good one that kind of ties into your question, Connor, about tools. It seems to me a lot of times these tools by default begin with not enough white space. They throw the whole kitchen sink at you when you go and you build something. You start adding in your dimensions, your measures, and start building. It's going to put in a lot more than you need sometimes, and it's going to ignore some of the things. I'm going to talk about visual hierarchy here in a moment. But that's where, regardless again of your tool, I think you need to make an intentional effort to declutter and simplify some of the things. And you can think of them as non-essential elements or non-data elements that are kind of wrapped around your visualization. So here's a simple one. I'm recreating that chart number 4 from our first section. Then I can start to say, well, we don't need all of these grid lines. We don't need these vertical grid lines. Let's pull those out. If your categories are obvious, we probably don't need the order date in this example, especially if this is a view that's part of a bigger dashboard that has a title that says, sales trends over the last 5 years. Like you know what we're looking at, so you can simplify in some cases there. And then even the precision and the level of detail in the numbers, seeing all of these zeros repeated multiple times is a bit of a fatigue on the eye and how you're looking at it. And so condensing that down, you can get to something that is the same data, but it's easier for the eye to understand what you're trying to show, and you can get to it a bit faster. So here's a quick view of the before and after of just saying no to some of the default settings that are going to come in from your BI tool.
What are Todd? What are some features you see people overusing, or what features maybe perhaps do you feel are overused? And what I'm getting at is, what do you see as commonly cluttering that white space?
Yeah.
Is it like yeah? I'll pass it off.
Yeah, no, it's a great question, Connor. Yeah, again, going back to the defaults of most of these tools, things around legends, as you start to build a dashboard, it'll often start bringing in too many redundant legends that are taking up just as much real estate sometimes as the view that you're trying to visualize itself. So just kind of being aware as you bring each component in, and I'm going to show you an example actually in this section of kind of what the default behavior might be and where you need to just be on your guard to say, okay, let's pull that back. And part of the reason I'd like to stress that is, if you look at the way, a little more, shot of theory here, but if you look at the way the human eye works and kind of the way we have these visual shortcuts, there's a great discussion of this in the book, Thinking Fast and Slow, about the two halves of your brain. You've got on the right, the system two, the part we're all using right now, mostly where you're sitting there, you're trying to focus on a Zoom meeting, you're trying to understand the agenda, using your analytical executive brain, that prefrontal cortex. But there's another part that's very intuitive and primitive, and that's just the way your eyes work before you even think about what's in front of you. And if you look at the concept there of these pre-attentive attributes, this is where some of the default behaviors of the BI tool can kind of get you in trouble. These are examples of ways your eye is designed without any thinking. It just notices. If you look at these 10 different areas, it sees the pop of color, it sees the pop of intensity, and you don't have to think about it to do it. And I showed this example in our first session, but it's worth bringing it up again for people who didn't see it. This is 2,500 numbers, and the number 8's in there one time. And if you try to find it right now, you're using that system two analytical brain and just pick a number and say, is that the 8? No, that's a 9. It's a lot of work. On this one, you probably found the 8 without even thinking at all. That's using that first system, that primitive system, the pre-attentive attribute system. You didn't have to think. Your eye just found it. So that's going on whether you like it or not in your stakeholder, in your business user, in your customer. So when you build the dashboard and you look at the different things that you're going to be laying out, I'm going to show you, how to play to that and try to avoid, getting your user very distracted or overwhelmed by what you're doing.
That's powerful stuff, Todd. I feel like you just did some black magic trickery on my eyes.
It's fascinating to me, Connor. Like it truly is the part of your brain that does things without thinking and versus the executive strategic part. And they both are at the table every time you build a visualization. Everyone has that going on. And yeah, I love it. Like here you're trying to think, and here you're not thinking, it's just reacting.
Mhm.
So to take that into some tactical examples now, if you look at, and this is, I think, a common area where you can get caught off guard, and I see this in a lot of dashboards, and it relates to the scales of whatever you're visualizing. And you've got three basic types of scales, the classic quantitative scale, what's the amount here? You have time scales, of course, those are self-explanatory. But the one that's I want to focus on is the categorical scales, because some categorical scales have an order to them. Like if you're ranking kids in college, you go through a sequence of freshman, sophomore, junior, senior, but you oftentimes have non-sequential categories, divisions, furniture categories, office supply categories, and those have a lot of latitude of how you're going to present it. So if you look at the sequential scale example, it's clear. There's only one way to do that. You want to put those dates in order. You don't want to put 2022 in the middle of 2020 and 2021. But if you then go down the same road and I start building a default visualization, and this is exactly as it happened when I built this, and I'm looking at a non-sequential categorical scale, here it just put them in alphabetical order. And furniture is the biggest, but it's the last one, and office supplies is in the middle. And by default, the tool created the legend, of course, and put the categories over there. So you start having some ways going back to the pre-attentive attributes to know, okay, my eye is going to go to the height of these bars. So let's order those non-sequential elements by the magnitude of whatever that measure is we're measuring it on. So that's better. Maybe going back to the way the visual system works, I don't need all of those colors. I've got the labels underneath, depending on how many marks I'm dealing with. It's now a little bit less burden on the eye to try to jump back and forth between the colors and the category. And just now I'm focused, I can see a trend here. And then maybe go one step further and say, let's use another pre-attentive attribute and say, let's emphasize the strongest one and show the gradient being the kind of the quantity of each of those measures. So without even reading the scale, I get a better sense. So that's kind of a simple walkthrough, but here's an example that's more realistic and a lot bigger. Like if I'm trying to go through and visualize sales by category with some sample data, this is the default behavior of Tableau. This is what it came out with right away without making any changes. This is a mess, right? So first step, go to a single color palette. A classic mistake I see in a lot of visualizations is you see all these colors. I better use them all. That's way too much tax on the visual system. So go to a single color palette to begin. Then do that ordering. These are non-sequential categories, so I can order it by the quantity of sales. And then if you look across the bottom, some of these are long names. This one I see a lot where people rotate those column headings on the bottom and try to fit in the long names, but you can simply swap them. And it's an obvious thing, and if you're doing that already, that's great. But sometimes you overlook that. So doing that swap makes it easier to do that reading. And then maybe the final piece is add that gradient to it. So now, as the user, when I come and look at this, instead of making sense of that first chart and doing a lot of taxing work back and forth, I can quickly see, oh, wow, chairs and phones are where it's at. So I want to shift gears now and talk, you mentioned about plugins. There are ways to accelerate what you're doing in these visualizations. And some of the commonly requested tools or visualization structures, they can take a while to build. They can just be kind of burdensome. They're kind of buggy, a lot of opportunities to make mistakes. And so there are some extensions you can use. Here's the first example. If you get a request for a Sankey diagram, and it's that nice flow chart and showing how the movement's happening. What I'm showing you here is a walkthrough of how to build one of those natively, in this case in Tableau. And it's not a quick process. There's a number of steps, a number of different table calculations you need to make, a number of configurations to make. It totally, you can do it. It's been done. A lot of opportunities for bugs and issues in creating this. So this is kind of a ripe opportunity, I think, to look for an extension to try to accelerate that. You can see here, I'm just kind of scrolling through this guide, and we're about 2/3 of the way into it, and we're almost to the point where you're going to see something kind of like a Sankey diagram. Okay, there's the lines are coming out, but a lot of work has gone into it. Here is an extension in Tableau that creates a new mark type called Sankey, and you can start dragging in your dimensions and measures and create it, and then spend more time on the story you're trying to tell and the analysis you're trying to do, and less time debugging a fairly involved workflow to build that visualization. So I think that's an area that is worth taking a look at if you haven't seen this yet.
How do you know, Todd, when you might need to go down this extension route and look for some, exterior functionality versus what is natively supported, in the platform? Is that when you get a requirement that might be pretty advanced and you just know from, tribal knowledge that, hey, that's not available to me in Power BI or Tableau? Or is it just kind of due to your freedom? You go out and look around. How do you kind of know when to do something, in the box versus bringing in an extension?
Yeah, great question. I would go back to start with the very first thing I showed, where I said one data set, 8 ways. If you're depending on where you are in your career doing this, go through and take one data set 20 ways and do every type of visualization default behavior that's built into your BI tool, and understand the gamut from A to Z of what's there, what can you do. And then you'll see, okay, this isn't normally on the menu for me. There isn't a way to do a Sankey diagram off the top of my head. And you'll kind of, like you said, it's that tribal knowledge. I think you'll just, after seeing it enough, you realize, okay, this is something I can do off the shelf. This is something I can roll my own, or maybe this is something that has an extension that can accelerate it and make it go faster for me. So you get just a matter of how many different scenarios you've tried to build before, and getting really familiar with whatever tool you're going to use. Exploit all of their default tools and just make sure oh yeah, I can see what's available. Because you'd rather not have to go down the route of using an extension. Everything comes with a cost. Some of these are free. Some of them you have to do a license. Anytime you're adding in a component like this, it adds a little opportunity for bugs and things to not go right. But that doesn't mean that doing it the other way is foolproof either. Like I think, as I showed you on that first slide, going through the normal hand rolling route, there's a lot of opportunities for mistakes in building it that way too. So.
Got it. No, super insightful.
And a couple other, extension ideas. Here's one on trying to do a different type of dashboard, and using, a concept. If anyone's spent time in web development, you look at image mapping and trying to make areas where you can have something that's clickable, that's part of an image. There are ways you can add extensions to do that and say, yeah, I want to go through and create navigation structures off of an image, and that might really work for what you're doing. Maybe that fits in. You do have a retail customer, and you're looking at a retail data set, and this is a perfect way to make it very easy and approachable for someone to just click through and click on these pictures. But this is a good example, Connor, of your last point, where you definitely don't have to use an extension to do this. You can go through and make your own custom buttons, and you can change the button from a button to an image. And there are definitely ways, like this is one where I might say, the Sankey diagram, I'd use the extension, but this, I would probably build this natively if I were building it in Tableau.
Got it. And it really kind of shows you just, kind of how far outside the box you can really go with some of these visualizations, from everything from that hex diagram you showed earlier on to the clickable picture buttons. I think there's a lot of variety kind of in these tools nowadays compared to just simple bar charts, line charts, pie charts. I know Mike Lamp on the line hates pie charts, but no, you're really building almost like an interface, a workflow. When these dashboards you can they live filter, they're dynamic. Maybe they take you to the next layer, right? It's a lot more than just, I think, a statistical, display when you start working with visualizations like these.
Yeah.
Are we loading, Todd? Do we still have
Yeah.
you? Yeah.
Yeah. It got the connection slowed for a minute, but can you hear me now?
Yep. Yep.
Yep. No, that's right. And it's funny, speaking of you, Mike Lampo, on that first slide with the 8 visualizations, I originally had a pie chart in there and I just couldn't bring myself to leave it. And so I changed it out for another equally troubling visualization, the bubble chart. But yeah, it's come a long way. And here's one more, example. Like this is something a lot of us have run into is building, funnel visualizations. And this is one you can do, fairly straightforward natively, but there also are some extensions to make this a little bit cleaner and a little bit more like if you've got that business user that wants it to really look like a great funnel, maybe it's a way to say, yep, okay, I'm going to lean on a tool to do that. All right, shifting gears to visual hierarchy. Yeah, this is one that I showed last time, but for people who missed that session, just take a look at this slide, and that's what your eye is going to do. It's going to just naturally go through, and it goes back to what I talked about some of these pre-attentive attributes, and it goes a little bit to in a Western country where we're reading from left to right. There's like a natural flow of what's going to happen. And so that manifests itself in any dashboard you're building. So this is an example of a dashboard looking at KPIs, and it's taking advantage of the way the eye is going to work, and it's aligned with exactly what the stakeholders want all the leaders in the company to be looking at. They want, this isn't just randomly placed on this dashboard. These different visualizations are in a hierarchy of the financial indicators are the most important, and the operational indicators on the second row are just below it. They're really important, but not quite as important as the sales and the sales-driven organization. And then some of these details at the bottom are definitely important, and we want them to be there and ready once you're ready to dig in from the top. But it's playing to that visual hierarchy. And then the filters you can see on the far right, they're last. I mean, they're important, but if you I see this as I can't call this a mistake because it's a lot of this is subjective, but in my view, bringing all those filters over to the left side gives them too much priority. The message should be about what you're trying to do, tracking these KPIs. People will find the filters when they're ready to dig in, but giving like prime alpha real estate in the top left corner to something that's secondary, or in this case, fourth level, I think being intentional about it is important.
Todd, for the folks out there
Yeah.
on the line that might be tasked with standardizing dashboard design kind of across the enterprise or their business unit, is this where you would recommend them start? Right? Like, I guess what I'm getting at is, right, we have dashboard 8, we have 100 dashboards, 50 dashboards, 20, 10,
Yeah.
whatever it is. They all just look extremely different and feel different color, right? Different formats. Is this where you recommend to start to go along that standardization journey?
Yeah, I would say it's a great starting point, Connor. Getting all of your designers on the same page around, this is the flow. It's intentional how we're laying things out, and having a set of templates. So like in this example, you can see here, this header, this footer, this filter area. That's the same. All the structures are repeatable. Down to the row level security and knowing who's logged in and the reset, like doing that in a repeatable manner across different developers and even in different tool sets will just help your cohesiveness for all of your stakeholders and users, get a better experience out of this.
Get that polished feel. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and you can align it with, all these companies have their own, corporate brand style guides of how you can use a logo, fonts, spacing around it. This is, kind of a cousin to that. Here's our visualization style guide of how we want to do it.
Right.
All the way down to dimensions. You can get into big debates around, do you make your dashboards automatically scale to the screen? Do you set them to a widescreen, to a phone view? Do you use dynamic breakpoints and have it change automatically? Thinking all of that through about your user and your stakeholder give you a good roadmap.
Todd, question, if you could just flip back to the last slide real quick. I see one coming
Yeah.
in from Mike Lampa. Is that third, I think what he's asking is that third level of detail also be lead time metrics where the upper levels are lag time oriented KPIs? Is that the thought process here for this use case?
Yeah, you definitely have that going on, and you can do it as well where you're getting into some of the drivers down below that are just flowing up to these top level KPIs. So it's trying to let you see it at the top, dig deeper, and understand kind of what are the inputs. Yep. Um,
Thank you.
Yeah, and in this example, this select detail view, there are 8 or 9 different detail views that appear based on kind of what that scenario is of which way you want to go to try to understand what's driving those KPIs. So related to that, if you think we talked at the top level about, how we're laying this stuff out, but then you get down into I'll just call it a view or a widget or a component level. Every dashboard is really just a collection of views or collection of visualizations. You've got that same visual hierarchy that's happening, from a text point of view. I mean, this is the same content in both of these examples. There's no hierarchy on the left other than just how it's ordered in the screen. On the right, you can definitely see a hierarchy. And then this can extend into how you're designing your views for yourself or for a multi-person team, and it can extend down into the visualization level itself. And you can see on the left and the right. I think I've got a bigger version. Yeah. So on the left, there's no visual hierarchy. I mean, everything's is kind of at the same level. And on the right, it's the exact same view, exact same data, but it's using that visual hierarchy I showed on the previous slide so that you're trying to lead the viewer and make it a little less work for them to go through and figure out, okay, what is this telling me? So that visual hierarchy concept, and you can just design this for yourself. And when you're building your first thing, this is a good part where Figma comes in. You can use any tool. You can use PowerPoint. I usually use Figma. It's nice to just go through and design kind of your basic element pattern. And then when I'm building something new, I'll go back and look at the Figma design and check it. And then once I've started building my first few views, then I just use in the BI tool, I just go to the one I just built to, use that same template. Um, Another point related to that is, I think to me, this is kind of a common opportunity to improve is unnecessary precision. So this is a toggle back and forth between that exact view we've been looking at with the default precision that Tableau gave me in this case, and it's showing me 44.92% versus toning that down a little bit. And there are cases where you're coming down to the hundredth or thousandth of a percent, and you're trying to make that comparison. And by all means, you have to have that. But it seems to me most of the time, especially in a dashboard with multiple views, you're trying to get the sense of the data, get the trend and the shape. And staring at 4 digits like this is a lot more work on that visual system than looking at just the necessary. And usually the tool will default to more detail than you need, more precision than you need. All right, this next section is one that, I said we're going to have a mixture of high-level strategy and low-level tactics. This is down in the weeds, but it's essential because it's the roommate we all have that will never leave, which is building just tabular data visualizations, right? No matter how cool the tool is and what you want to do, you're going to have to use tables. You're going to be required to use tables sometimes.
Right. We always joke about clients just recreating Excel and the Power BI or Tableau or even a self-service tool like a ThoughtSpot that's kind of more search based. But ultimately, at the end of the day, if that's the requirement, that's the requirement. Particularly for probably something more operational in nature, right? Less
Yeah,
analytical. So, do we actually want to pop up the poll now? So I
yeah.
think we have a poll here for the group where we want to understand um, who all out there actually gets requirements to build tabular views, right? This is pretty common that from our impression. So we want to understand, yes, I often get requests to build tabular visualizations. No, I don't often get requests that specify tabular visualizations as the outcome, or really it's up to me to decide the style and chart I get to use. If everyone could just take a minute out there to, pop in the question and we'll get going.
Yep, we're getting answers rolling in. This is great. We have about 50% of the folks on the line have participated so far. It continues to climb. We'll keep the graph or the poll rather up for another few seconds, and then we'll share it back so you can see how you stack up. Okay. All right. We will end the poll here and share results.
I think it's probably what we expected, maybe.
Yeah.
Probably it's definitely, I think what we expected was probably more people in the yes column than the no column, I would say. And then I think unexpected, or I should say expected, is that I think, the autonomy of the BI developer to really, kind of own the solution, I think is pretty common as well. I don't think there's too many, that seems like a pretty accurate answer there. Do those answers resonate with you, Todd?
Yeah. No, that's good. It's good to see the latitude to do it the right way. But I think it's always going to be there, whether it's being requested or not. Sometimes it is the best way. I mean, there are a lot of cases where
Mhm.
this is the right piece, and it goes into this first tip, which is when I look at dashboards out in the wild, I see a wide variety of how things are aligned. And this is, as deep into the minutiae as you can get, but there are some subtle ways to think about how to decide what to do. And the first one is if you're trying to get somebody to compare the numbers, that's when you want to write justify it. And it again plays off of those pre-attentive attributes. One of those was the length. When I look down here in the technology, my eye just jumps to that bigger number, and it's helpful to use it in that case. But it's not, and I think that's a pretty commonly understood concept. But it's not always what you want to do. You sometimes have data that you don't want people to compare, and if you do right align it, you're inviting a comparison that you might not want them to make. That's just doesn't add up. Like in this example, I'm looking at a customer snapshot. And if I'm looking at, total number of customers and the count of orders, they're really not, they're not two things that I want someone to try to say, oh yeah, this is better than that. I mean, they're different. I'm really got the focus on, oh, I'm trying to understand the snapshot of what's our average quantity per order, just the basic profile. And so here I'm intentionally left aligning that data versus on this example, I was right aligning it because I'm like, no, yeah, I'm inviting comparison to try to understand the difference. I think that's a subtle point that often people aren't thinking about, but keep it in mind as you're laying out your dashboard and wondering how to do it. Um, I've got a link here to a great resource, and I'm not going to take the time today to walk through all of these, where you can just go through and look at scenario after scenario of small ways to look at that the text and tables. I'll point out number 5 down here. I think this is a good one. I showed this in a visual bar chart example, but here's the same thing in the level of precision, just in a tabular view, where you may not need to get down to 4 significant digits to the right of the decimal to try to make the point. And it's just a lot more work for the eye to try to read these numbers. I don't need to know the 5 cents here on the sales, and instead, look at it more broadly and understand, okay, yeah, I can see the trend here. So, some good tactical pieces here. Trying to enhance the table. So now you can move on from just a bare bones, basic table. You can start to do some things to weave in a lot of the points I've been covering so far, like get rid of some of the unnecessary grid lines your visualization tool will do. Bring in a little bit of a hierarchy here on what we're trying to point out. You can start to refine, the way a table looks. These are 2 identical tables. The only difference is adding a little bit of a heat map.
Oh,
Did we just lose our boy?
we
We just
lost
lose Todd.
him.
Oh no.
The heat map got too hot and he was out. Here he
Oh, we got him
is.
back.
Guys, I'm
Welcome
back.
back.
They done got him. Mac got too hot.
Welcome back. All right. So sorry about that, everybody.
Nope,
But
no
can you
problem.
see the slides again?
Yep.
Yeah, so they're both the exact same table, but just bringing in, and this is useful if you have a case where someone says it has to just be a table. Say, well, here it is as a table. Here it is with a little more insight. just bringing in that color coding to quickly jump out, like see what your eye does. Like, oh wow, phones in the tech area in 2022 is quick. Quickly, I can see that versus trying to get to it from just the tabular view. It takes a bit more work. And then, if you can, go, kind of the sky's the limit and say, hey, I still want to use a table, but I want to totally transform it. Here's an example of identical data. They're both a table structure, but bringing in some of the context to whatever the objective was. Like, why were you building the table in the first place? Oh, it's trying to figure out, problematic orders that haven't been shipped yet. Okay, I prioritize that in the design of this table on the right, and so now it just pops up for the user.
It's much cleaner. It almost looks like a web page when you take it to that next level. It doesn't. You wouldn't even know it's Power BI or Tableau under the hood. I think a lot of the
Yeah,
time take it to that level.
yeah, exactly. I mean, yeah, you can do a lot to just change, what it means to make a table, I think, and just make it a lot more usable. It's kind of like the tagline for our first version of this webinar series was, how to not build a dashboard that no one uses, right? Like, you want to do something that gets the user back in, gets them to spend more time with it. This next one is a little bit more, kind of out there on its use, which is one I wanted to bring up just as a subtle example. So sometimes you're looking at data and it gets crowded, and you're trying to understand a little bit of the shape of the data, a little bit of, kind of the pattern behind it. And in this example, I'm using just a box plot showing, okay, here's the amount of sales in these different product categories, and you start getting things stacked up on top of each other. And sometimes you can lose some of the message of what's going on in there. So if I look in here before I animate it, so for instance, look at tables. Tables and accessories, kind of both look very, very similar. But if you look at it and you add a little bit of jitter and a little bit of space, actually there's a lot more of an even distribution here in the table. That's not as deep as accessories. Is still almost all of it crowded around really small sales amounts. But you can't see that when the marks are stacked up on top. So jittering is just a method to go through and add a little bit of randomness and a little bit of space. It doesn't come without its own issues and its own cost. You can misinterpret what the data means. You'll notice here there's no axis going across the bottom, and it's not, there's no, you can interpret the wrong meaning from that. But if you understand the audience, they understand how you're laying it out. By spacing out some of that data with a jitter, you can get to it. You can see here, just adding in a simple random function and pushing around my data points a little bit. But it opens up some other doors. Like, if I wanted to put more detail and put mark labels on this visualization, you'll see that here in a minute. I'm going to turn it on for both of these views. On the one on the left, there's hardly any data that you can show because it's just everything is stacked. On the one on the right with the jitter, you can see a lot of the data points and see actual values. And so just because of the extra spacing, it opens the window. And maybe what you wanted to have on there were names of employees, and this is employee rankings. And it'd be really helpful to see, Sarah and Mike and Bob's names in there versus on the left. It's just, it's hard to do. So jittering is one that's a bit out there, but if you haven't looked at it before, there are examples. Here's an example of where you can take the jitter concept and allow you to make your mark even a little bit bigger. And instead of crowding out the entire box plot, I can make a bigger mark because of the spacing. I can put a little bit more context, like this is a ranking approach. And I'm trying to rank these different stores and how they're doing across KPIs. And, this lended itself nicely to a jitter layout. So tip 9 is, I've talked about a lot of stuff down in the trenches and a lot of things we were trying to discover the insight. And it gets into, I'll do a recap here of the type of dashboard you're building. And in my view, you've got three styles. You've got discovery dashboards where you're trying to understand and explore the data, reporting the news dashboards where it's like, oh no, these are the KPIs. Everyone needs to be on the same page. This is it. And then storytelling where it's, hey, I've been looking at this data and there's something interesting going on here, right? So if you think about how a dashboard works and kind of the expertise of your audience and the features that you're going to include in it, discovery dashboards have the most features. You're trying to throw the kitchen sink at it, use a lot of different chart types and figure things out. the audience probably has to have a bit more expertise with the analytics tool to know how to get the value out of it. The reporting dashboard, you might tone it down and it's more static and you have less features, and it doesn't require as much from the audience in terms of expertise with analytics. And then storytelling is kind of the last stop where you strip out a lot of the interactivity and you can just sit back and watch as a user. And most of the time, when I'm on an analytics journey, you start with discovery. You do enough work there to figure out how to do the reporting. And then maybe you get to the point where, hey, I need to do storytelling in an executive boardroom I have a small amount of time and I need to get this point across. And here's an example of that. And this is, in a population health setting where it's looking at a large diabetes prevention program and trying to understand the effects of program features in the coaching tool and how it leads to weight loss and how many times people weigh in and how long the weight loss survives. So in this case, we took a discovery dashboard because some of the people in the room wanted to see all the details, but then we added up at the top these story points that say, a typical person loses 5.8% of their body weight for 15 months. And then when you just click on the story point on the right, it filters everything and says, but using this one feature where people could brag to Facebook about their success, their weight loss increased to 9.2%, and the weigh-in duration, the weight loss increased to 26 months, 75% improvement. It distilled out what was found from the discovery and put it into a storytelling mode so that you can just guide the user, and the only thing you can do is just click between these two buttons. And you can use, you can build this type of an approach in just about any visualization tool, but it's a way to really guide the user and tell a story versus here's the data and figure out what's in it.
Yeah, I really like that toggle bar at the top that kind of display outlines two scenarios, like scenario one and scenario two.
Mm-hmm.
It just kind of leaves the results to speak for themselves, right? This would be, very clean in an
Yeah.
executive presentation, right? If you needed to have 10 minutes to, speak to these points instead of flipping
Yeah.
through a PowerPoint deck, right? Or a PDF,
Oh
being able
yeah.
to have a view like this.
Yeah, exactly. And you can just toggle back and forth, and then the client will often say, "Yeah, I want to. Oh yeah, let me see what's happening." And I've done these where you've got 5 buttons up at the top, and you're taking them through a journey of these were the recruitment strategies that led to the most user adoption, and then once the users came in, here's what happened in the market segment you're most interested in, and you just step that through. So definitely, think about where you are in the analytics journey, who your stakeholder is, and are you in that discovery mode, reporting the news mode, or maybe the storytelling mode.
Mm.
The last one I've got, and this is where I tease in the beginning, you always like to try to include like a little 90-second tutorial, see if I can do something quickly. Quadrant analysis. So this is it's just a simple one of looking at, how can you let the user pick their own quadrants and figure out, in this simple example, trying to look at sales versus profit and understand, how many of my customers am I getting across the bar in these different areas. So a very common scenario, just a classic scatter plot, but brings some interactivity to it. So here's going through and setting that up. Again, this is going to be a Tableau example, but bringing in my dimensions and measures, creating the simple scatter plot, setting my detail to be the customer name, so I'm breaking up by my customers. Now just making 2 quick parameters, one for sales and one for profit, and showing them in the view. So now I've got those over on the right, so you can see what those levels are. And then adding 2 reference lines. And the trick here is the reference line is pointing to those 2 parameters. So each one is going to be on my visualization controlled by that parameter. So right now I could go over there and manually change it with that parameter and put these reference lines. So you get that kind of nice crosshair on your view. So that's the kind of the first part of it. Now to make it kind of that hover effect, I'm just adding in a little dashboard action so that when someone hovers over this view, I update the parameter based on what they're hovering on. So they can sit there and do that behavior of, well, what if we change this threshold and made it higher? How many of our customers would be falling into this category? So just adding a couple of dashboard behaviors, and so now it's updating those parameters as I move. And then the last piece is just a simple calculated field, little if-then logic of if sales is greater than the parameter or less than the parameter, this is the top right or the top left. So put in that calculated field and say color this view by that calculated field. And then I'm just changing the mark types a little bit, turning them into circles, changing the opacity so that if they're on top of each other, you can see it a little better. But yeah, so there's a quick kind of lightning round of walking through building one of these things in a BI tool. And all
Great.
these views, a lot of these views I've made are on up on Tableau Public. You can get to them on my Tableau Public profile if you want to play around with any of these and you happen to be a Tableau user. So.
Awesome. Thanks, Todd. That's super insightful. I actually have a question coming in the chat from Juan here, kind of back on the storytelling example. When you're telling a story, the awareness of the audience is key. The more senior executive of the audience, the more simplified the visual should be. Do you agree with that statement?
Yes, in general. But I've seen it go both ways. Like in this example, this is working with kind of executive leaders, but in a healthcare context where those executive leaders are medical directors and very, very comfortable and tactical in what they want to understand around the details behind it. So this example has a bit more detail because the audience in the room wants to really understand it. But I'd say if you're just looking at a general guideline, yeah, take kind of going back to this view here, take less and less of these advanced features out and less of the complexity out if you're going into that storytelling mode. It's going to be faster and less chance to lose the audience.
Less distracting.
Yes.
Great. Thanks, Todd.
You're
Kelly,
welcome.
do we want to open it up to the audience just for some questions here? I'm looking at the clock and see we only have a few minutes left. If we
Yeah.
want to do open questions with the audience, open Q&A. We had that question
Yep.
from Juan. Is there anyone else out there on the line that has any questions for Todd or myself? Just kind of anything in regarding what we've seen here today. Oh, Todd, could you pull up your LinkedIn page? Yeah, could you leave this up?
Yep. Yeah, be happy to visit with anybody and yeah, definitely love this topic, and there's still a lot more we could discuss about it.
Todd, real quick, could you just maybe for those that are maybe more Power BI oriented, could you just kind of just give us a brief synopsis of Tableau Public and what and kind of and what that is for the group out there?
Oh, sure. Yeah, Tableau Public is a great resource, and it's even though it's called Tableau Public, any BI developer just go and explore it. It is a collection of data visualizations, dashboards that all of them have the requirement of you have to publish the data up onto Tableau Public, and then anyone can interact with it in a browser, and so you can go through and just play with these visuals in whatever browser, and you can download the workbook and the associated data. So Tableau, of course, charges a fee if you want to, host your own private data on Tableau Server or Tableau Cloud, but they let you do it for free on Tableau Public if you put the data there and you let people download the dashboard. So everything that's there is public domain and is designed. There's a lot of public service things,
Right.
tornado data and weather data and stuff like that. But it's fantastic as a resource because you can go through and just search your industry, search the type of data you're working on. You'll probably find a visualization there that you can just go play with.
So even for our Power BI folks on the call, there might be some inspiration for them to find out there. And then for the Tableau folks, this is a super powerful resource, and particularly to get a look at your specific portfolio of templates as well.
Yeah, yeah, it's a great tool. Yeah, definitely use it regardless of the platform you like to use.
Great. Another fantastic session. I echo what Mike Lampa just wrote into the chat. Thank you so much for presenting this, Todd. You clearly have a wealth of information, and you make it look so easy with all those like all of the screenshots of just kind of clicking through. But it's really awesome to see it like this. So I've added some links in the chat for anybody who wants to connect with us. You can find us at hike2.com and see all of our data and analytics services there. I also added the YouTube link to not only our Great Data Minds channel at large, but also the first session that we did for data visualizations for anybody who wants to check that out. We are right at time. Thank you both so much, Todd and Connor, for joining us again on this great topic. And I wish everybody a wonderful day.
Yeah,
Thanks,
thank you.
everybody.
Thank you, Todd. Thank you, Kalia. Thank you, everyone who
You're
joined.
welcome. Have a
Thanks.
good one. Bye-bye.
Bye.